I never meant to overhear their conversation that night. My son forgot to hang up his phone after calling to check on me. That's when I heard it. They called me a financial burden, said my dementia was getting worse, and planned to force me into assisted living. They were already dividing my estate worth over $1.2 million. I didn't confront them. Instead, I made one phone call that changed everything. When they returned from their vacation, the locks were changed, and what they found inside shattered their perfect plan. Betrayal has consequences, and this time, the professor had one final lesson to teach. The January wind swept across Lake Michigan, carrying with it tiny ice crystals that tapped against the windows of my Hyde Park brownstone. Chicago winters had always been brutal, but this one felt particularly unforgiving. Perhaps it was the absence of Margaret's warmth that made the cold seep deeper into my bones these days. I adjusted the thermostat before settling into my evening routine. The soft glow of my reading lamp illuminated the worn chessboard positioned on the mahogany table by the bay window, a table I'd purchased 40 years ago when I first received tenure at the University of Chicago. Chess had become my refuge since Margaret passed 3 years ago. Our weathered board still occupied the place where we'd spent countless evenings in quiet competition. Her queen eternally in check against my defensive formation, our last game left unfinished when the cancer finally claimed her. "Your move, Maggie," I murmured, studying the board as I had every night since her funeral. My fingers, now bent with arthritis, caressed the carved rosewood knight, her favorite piece, always deployed with cunning precision. The sudden shrill ring of the landline telephone shattered my contemplation. I glanced at the antique grandfather clock in the corner, 8:17 p.m., late for casual calls. The caller ID flashed with my son Michael's name. I reached for the receiver, knocking over my water glass in the process. The liquid pooled around my pill organizer, the one Margaret had insisted on purchasing after my mild heart attack 5 years ago. "Color-coded," she'd said with that practical efficiency I'd adored. "Even an absent-minded professor can't mix these up." "Dad, how's my favorite retired professor doing?" Michael's voice carried that practiced cheerfulness I'd grown to recognize over the years, the tone he used when checking a box on his dutiful son list. "Still breathing, still thinking," I replied, adjusting my reading glasses and blotting the water with a handkerchief. "How's Seattle treating you?" "Rainy as ever. The surgical department's keeping me busy. 3 spinal reconstructions this week alone." He paused and I could hear papers shuffling in the background, always multitasking my son, even during personal calls. "Look, Vanessa and I are heading to Maui tomorrow for that medical conference I mentioned. Just wanted to check in before we go." "The neurosurgery symposium, right?" I remembered him mentioning it during our last conversation, brief and perfunctory like most of our interactions these days. "Your mother would have been proud to see how far you've come." Michael laughed, a sound that still carried echoes of the eager boy who'd once peppered me with questions about cognitive psychology and game theory. "Well, it's not all work. We're adding a few vacation days. The hospital's covering the flights, so why not enjoy some beach time?" "You deserve it," I said sincerely. Despite our complicated relationship, I'd never questioned his dedication to his medical career. The framed photograph on my bookshelf showed him at his medical school graduation, flanked by Margaret and me, all of us beaming with pride. "How's Vanessa's practice doing?" "Her therapy clients love her. The geriatric specialty is really taking off. Seems like everyone's worried about their aging parents these days." There was something pointed in his tone that I chose to ignore. "She's actually presenting a paper on elder care psychology at the conference. Transitioning seniors to supportive environments or something like that." I could hear the pride in his voice when he spoke of his wife of 12 years. A clinically precise woman with a perpetual clipboard and calculating eyes behind designer frames. Margaret had never warmed to her, sensing something cold beneath the polished exterior. "Your Vanessa always seems to be evaluating me," she'd whispered during their last visit before her diagnosis. "Like I'm a specimen rather than a mother-in-law." "Send her my love," I said, the social nicety automatic after decades of academic diplomacy. "And bring me back one of those tacky Hawaiian shirts. The more garish, the better." "Will do, Dad." Michael's voice shifted slightly, taking on that carefully modulated tone he used when approaching a delicate subject. "Listen, I should go. Still need to pack. Are you keeping up with your medications, following Dr. Levine's care plan?" I glanced at the pill organizer, colors arranged in neat rows. Monday through Sunday, morning and evening doses, heart medication, blood pressure tablets, cholesterol management, the pharmaceutical backdrop to my twilight years. Michael, I've been managing my own meds for 76 years. I think I can handle it. I know, Dad. It's just... He hesitated. Vanessa noticed you seemed a bit confused when we visited last month. You put your coffee in the microwave and forgot about it 3 times. The comment stung more than it should have. One weekend visit, and they were tallying my senior moments like evidence in a case. One forgetful day doesn't mean I'm falling apart. Of course not. Just take care of yourself, okay? I'll call when we get back next Friday. Enjoy your trip. Give my best to Vanessa. Love you, Dad. Love you too, son. I heard the click of the call ending, followed by muffled sounds. Michael must have pressed the wrong button, a common occurrence with his perpetually multitasking lifestyle. I was about to replace the receiver when I heard Vanessa's voice in the background. Is he still on the line? Did you tell him about the assessments? My hand froze, the receiver halfway to its cradle. No. Michael's voice had lost its warmth. I couldn't bring myself to do it yet. The timing's not right. Honey, we've discussed this. Vanessa's tone was crisp, clinical. Your father's cognition is clearly declining. He left the stove on last time we visited. What if there's a fire? The insurance company already flagged the incident with his car backing into the neighbor's fence. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't told Michael about the minor fender bender last month, a momentary misjudgment backing out of my driveway that resulted in a dented panel on Mrs. Abernathy's picket fence. I'd handled it directly with her, writing a check to cover the repairs. Had the neighbors called him directly? I know. Michael sounded frustrated, but telling him we've scheduled cognitive assessments with a memory care specialist feels like a betrayal. He built his career on his intellect. The great Professor Sullivan, whose theories on strategic decision-making are still taught in graduate programs across the country. Sometimes compassion means making difficult decisions, Vanessa replied, her voice softening into what I recognized as her therapeutic tone, the one she likely used with families struggling to place elderly parents in care facilities. The brownstone alone is worth at least $1.2 million in today's market. If we sell it, we can ensure he gets the best care possible. And what about the investment portfolio? Michael asked, his voice dropping slightly, as if discussing a business transaction rather than his father's financial assets. Last statement showed nearly $800,000. That could easily cover 5 years at Lakeside Gardens. Lakeside Gardens. The upscale assisted living facility I'd driven past countless times, modern architecture and manicured lawns overlooking Lake Michigan's northern shore, the place where former colleagues had disappeared, rarely to be seen again in academic circles, a golden cage with meal plans and bingo nights. More like 7 years with prudent management, Vanessa calculated. We should meet with Jared at Northwestern Mutual when we get back. As your father's power of attorney, you'll need to start the process of transitioning his assets. I don't have power of attorney yet, Michael corrected her. He'd have to sign those papers. Well, the cognitive assessment results will help with that. Once we have documentation of diminished capacity, the courts will support our petition. It's for his own good. He'll fight it. You know how stubborn he is. Remember the battle just to get him to use a pill organizer after Mom died? Vanessa's laugh sent ice through my veins, a soft, dismissive sound utterly devoid of true humor. He won't even understand what's happening. Did you see how grateful he was when you fixed his television last month? All you did was press the input button. He's already more confused than he lets on. The sooner we move on this, the better. The remote control incident. I'd been struggling with multiple remotes after a power outage reset all my entertainment devices. A minor technological hiccup that apparently had become evidence in their case against my cognitive abilities. You're right, Michael conceded, his voice taking on the decisive tone he'd inherited from me. When we get back from Maui, we'll start the process. Maybe we can even look at that vacation property in Michigan we've been eyeing. The one on Lake Superior? Perfect timing, actually. If we move quickly, we could close on both properties by summer. Their voices faded as they apparently moved to another room, but I'd heard enough. The chess piece I'd been holding, a knight, snapped in my fingers, the carved rosewood head breaking cleanly from its base. For 47 years, I'd taught game theory and strategic decision-making at the University of Chicago. I'd literally written textbooks on anticipating opponents' moves, identifying weaknesses in their strategies, and formulating optimal countermeasures. My doctoral students had gone on to positions at the Federal Reserve, Wall Street investment firms, and Pentagon think tanks, and yet I'd completely failed to see this betrayal coming from my own son. I replaced the phone receiver with trembling hands. Across the room, Margaret's portrait seemed to watch me with knowing eyes from its silver frame. The photograph captured her in her early 60s, still vibrant with intellectual curiosity, her psychology department office visible in the background. She'd always been suspicious of Vanessa's perfect smile and calculated gestures. "You were right, Maggie," I whispered to my late wife's image, always seeing what I couldn't. I leaned back in my chair, a strange calm replacing the initial shock. I'd spent my career analyzing complex systems and predicting outcomes based on limited information. Now I needed to apply those skills to my own life, perhaps for the last time. My eyes drifted to the chessboard. The queen was vulnerable, but not defeated. Several moves remained before checkmate. "Let's see if your old professor has one last lesson to teach," I murmured, reaching for my address book. The leather-bound volume contained connections from a lifetime in academia, including several former students who'd gone into elder law. It was time to make my countermove. The night passed without sleep. I sat in my study surrounded by the artifacts of my academic career, methodically reviewing my options with the same analytical precision I'd applied to complex game theory scenarios for decades. Dawn found me at my desk, legal pad filled with notes, financial documents spread across the polished surface. I'd traced every account, every investment, every property record, the full accounting of a lifetime spent in prudent academic thrift, bolstered by Margaret's inheritance from her parents and shrewd investment choices during the market's better years. The total was substantial, nearly $2 million including the brownstone's value. More than enough to fund my remaining years, even with the inevitable medical expenses that awaited me. More than enough to tempt a son and daughter-in-law with dreams of lakefront property. I rose stiffly, joints protesting after hours of immobility, and moved to the window. Outside, the University of Chicago campus lay under a blanket of fresh snow, Gothic spires rising against the lightning sky. I'd walked those paths for nearly 5 decades, from eager assistant professor to department chair to emeritus status, my intellectual home. This brownstone had been part of that journey, purchased when tenure finally provided the security to put down permanent roots. Margaret and I had restored it lovingly, stripping layers of paint from original woodwork, uncovering parquet floors beneath dingy carpeting, installing built-in bookshelves to house our overflowing academic libraries. Michael had grown up in these rooms, learned to read in the window seat I'd built in his bedroom, done homework at the kitchen table where Margaret graded papers, left for college from the front door, returned for holidays, brought Vanessa home to meet us. The house held the archaeological layers of our family history, and now they planned to sell it from under me, package me away to some facility with bland walls and fluorescent lighting, all while dividing my assets like scavengers. My reflection in the window showed a man I sometimes failed to recognize. Silver hair thinned dramatically since Margaret's death, shoulders slightly stooped, face mapped with the topography of 76 years, but the eyes remained sharp, calculating, the mind behind them still capable of complex strategic analysis. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. "Levinson, Goldberg and Associates. How may I direct your call?" The receptionist's voice was professionally pleasant. "Rebecca Levinson, please. Tell her it's Professor Howard Sullivan." A moment later, a familiar voice came on the line. "Professor Sullivan? Is that really you?" "Hello, Rebecca. It's been too long." "Nearly 15 years." Her voice carried genuine warmth. "Your game theory seminar changed my entire approach to law. I still have your textbook on my office shelf, completely highlighted and dog-eared, I'm afraid." "Most gratifying to hear. Analytical frameworks tend to outlive their creators," she laughed. "Always the philosopher. What can I do for you?" "I find myself in need of specialized legal counsel, discreetly and quickly." There was a pause. "I specialize in elder law now, Professor. Is this precisely why I'm calling? My son and daughter-in-law are planning to have me declared incompetent and seize control of my assets. I need to understand my options." Rebecca's voice turned professional immediately. "Can you come to my office today? This sounds urgent." "Very. How's 2 p.m.? I'll clear my schedule." After hanging up, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Rebecca had been one of my brightest students, tenacious, ethical, and brilliant at anticipating adversaries' strategies. Her dissertation on game theory applications in legal negotiations had been exceptional, earning university-wide recognition. Exactly the ally I needed. I spent the next hour organizing my financial records, investment portfolio statements showing conservative but steady growth under Morgan Stanley's management, property deed to the brownstone purchased for $175,000 in 1986, now worth over $1 million. Margaret's life insurance payout, wisely invested after her passing, retirement accounts from both our academic careers, medical records showing my recent physical with Dr. Levine, blood pressure, surprisingly good for your age, cholesterol, well controlled with medication, cognitive assessment, unremarkable, medical speak for normal. By noon, I was ready. I showered carefully, using the grab bars Margaret had insisted on installing after my knee replacement 5 years ago, not because I needed them, but because prevention is better than a broken hip, as she'd said with characteristic practicality. I dressed carefully in my best suit, charcoal gray with subtle pinstripes, Margaret's favorite. My fingers fumbled slightly with the tie, a silk design she'd given me for our 40th anniversary. Always dress for the position you want, she used to say, straightening my collar before university functions. Today, I was dressing for independence. My neighbor, Arnold Peterson, a retired English professor with whom I occasionally shared evening scotch and literary debates, spotted me as I carefully navigated my front steps. "Quite dapper today, Howard," he called from his porch, where he was unsuccessfully battling the morning's accumulation of snow. "Off to dazzle the undergraduates with a guest lecture?" "A different sort of performance, Arnold," I replied, steadying myself on the wrought iron railing. "Legal matters." His eyebrows rose above wire-rimmed glasses. "Nothing serious, I hope?" "Simply ensuring my affairs are in order." The practiced deflection of a man who'd spent decades navigating faculty politics. "How's Sarah?" I asked, redirecting the conversation to his daughter. "Just made partner at her firm in Boston, corporate law, makes more in a month than I did in a year of teaching Chaucer." He beamed with paternal pride. "Give her my congratulations. I remember her as an impressive young woman." As I carefully made my way to the street where my car waited, I realized with sudden clarity that I hadn't seen Arnold's 3 grandchildren visit in over a year. There had been some tension, I recalled. Something about Sarah wanting her parents to move to a retirement community in Massachusetts. Perhaps I wasn't the only one engaged in intergenerational warfare. I drove carefully through Hyde Park's narrow streets, past landmarks that had defined my adult life, the university buildings where I'd taught thousands of students, the bookstore where Margaret and I had held our academic publication celebrations, the restaurant where we'd celebrated Michael's medical school acceptance. Rebecca's office occupied the 15th floor of a sleek downtown building with views of Lake Michigan. Her firm, Levinson, Goldberg & Associates, specialized in estate planning and elder advocacy, with a growing reputation for fighting predatory guardianship cases, according to my pre-meeting research. Her assistant, a young man with an efficient manner, escorted me to a comfortable conference room. "Ms. Levinson will be with you shortly, Professor Sullivan. Can I bring you coffee or water?" "Coffee, black, thank you." Some preferences remained constant through the decades. When Rebecca entered, I momentarily failed to reconcile this accomplished attorney with the earnest graduate student I remembered. At 45, Rebecca Levinson had become exactly the formidable presence I'd predicted during her university days. Tailored suit, confident stride, sharp eyes behind designer frames that assessed and calculated. Her handshake was firm, her smile genuine. "Professor Sullivan, it's truly good to see you." She gestured to a comfortable chair across from her desk. "Though I wish under better circumstances." "Call me Howard, please. The professor is long retired." She smiled. "Old habits. Now tell me everything." I recounted the overheard conversation, watching her face darken as I detailed Michael and Vanessa's plans. Rebecca took meticulous notes, interrupting occasionally for clarification, her expression growing increasingly concerned. "Unfortunately, this scenario is distressingly common," she said when I finished. "Adult children, often with the best intentions initially, begin seeing their parents as obstacles rather than people. Assets become more important than agency." "What can I do?" Rebecca leaned forward. "First, let's be clear about your current legal status. No power of attorney exists?" "None. I've never signed such documents." "No guardianship or conservatorship proceedings have been initiated?" "Not that I'm aware of." "Good." She made notes on a legal pad. "You currently have complete control over your assets and decisions. Let's ensure it stays that way." "How?" "Several approaches. We could establish an irrevocable trust that protects your assets while maintaining your access to them. We could create a power of attorney that names someone other than your son, perhaps a trusted friend or another relative." I shook my head. "Those are defensive moves, Rebecca. I taught you better than that." A smile flickered across her face. "You want an offensive strategy?" "Precisely. I want to ensure they can never implement their plan while teaching them the consequences of their betrayal. Rebecca studied me for a moment, her legal training battling with the strategic thinking I'd once encouraged in her. The brownstone. You mentioned it's worth approximately $1.2 million? According to recent appraisals, yes. And it's solely in your name? Since Margaret passed, yes. Then legally, you could sell it tomorrow if you wished. Your son has no claim whatsoever without a guardianship ruling, which would require court proceedings and medical evidence. I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. And if I sold it before they returned from their trip? Rebecca's eyebrows rose slightly. That would be decisive. Real estate transactions typically take weeks, but with the right buyer and motivation, it could be done in days. She paused. Are you certain that's what you want? I thought of Michael and Vanessa discussing my diminished capacity while planning their vacation home purchase with my money. I remembered my son's dismissive tone when referencing my supposed confusion. The son I'd put through undergraduate and medical school, the son whose first home down payment had come from our savings, the son who'd promised Margaret on her deathbed that he'd look after me. I've never been more certain of anything. Then let me introduce you to Eleanor Chen. She handles our firm's real estate transactions and has connections with several investment groups specializing in rapid acquisitions. If anyone can expedite this process, she can. 20 minutes later, Eleanor Chen joined us, a pragmatic woman in her 50s with an encyclopedic knowledge of Chicago real estate. She carried a tablet filled with market analyses and comparable sales figures. Historic brownstone in Hyde Park with original features? Near the university? Her eyes gleamed with professional interest. That's extremely desirable in today's market. How quickly do you need to move? My son returns from Hawaii next Friday. I'd like everything completed before then. Eleanor nodded, as if I'd asked for something entirely reasonable. Cash buyers are your best option. No financing delays, minimal contingencies. I know 3 investment groups actively looking for properties in that area. We could have offers within 48 hours. And closing? With motivated buyers and a cooperative seller, which you are, we could potentially close by next Wednesday. Rebecca interjected, Howard, selling this quickly typically means accepting somewhat less than market value. I waved away her concern. I'm more interested in speed and certainty than maximizing profit. Eleanor made notes on her tablet. I'll arrange for a photographer tomorrow morning. By tomorrow afternoon, I'll have a targeted marketing package to my premium client list. We should see initial offers by Friday. As we finalized details, Rebecca pulled out another document. There's one more thing to consider, Howard. Your son will obviously be shocked when he discovers you've sold the house. What about your other assets, the investment portfolio? What do you suggest? Moving it to a new financial institution, one where your son has no established relationship. I have several clients who speak highly of Chicago Trust and Savings. They offer excellent wealth management services with enhanced security protocols. Make the arrangements, I said. I want everything transferred. And regarding your living situation after the sale? I hadn't thought that far ahead, focused as I was on the immediate countermove. The Gold Coast Grand has excellent furnished executive apartments available on monthly leases, Eleanor offered. Many of my clients use them during transitional periods, full security, housekeeping services, even a concierge. The image of myself in a luxury apartment free from Michael's manipulations brought the first genuine smile to my face in days. Perfect. Arrange it, please. As I left their office 2 hours later, I felt decades younger. The opponents had made their move, assuming I wouldn't even see the board, but the game was far from over. The next 5 days passed in a blur of purposeful activity. Eleanor's team photographed the brownstone on Thursday morning, capturing the original woodwork, custom bookshelves, and period details in their best light. By Thursday evening, she had 3 offers. $115 million all cash from lakefront properties, she reported by phone. They specialize in university area investments, minimal contingencies, just a walk-through inspection. They can close Tuesday. Accept it, I said without hesitation. Friday and the weekend were devoted to practical matters. Rebecca helped me open new accounts at Chicago Trust and Savings, transferring my investment portfolio and retirement funds to their management. The bank's private client advisor, a meticulous man named Theodore Harrington, established enhanced security protocols requiring in-person verification for any significant transactions. No one will be able to access these accounts without your physical presence and multiple forms of identification, he assured me, explaining the biometric security features and additional authorization steps that would protect my assets. Eleanor secured me a one-bedroom apartment at the Gold Coast Grand, available immediately with a month-to-month lease. The modern building offered views of the lake, 24-hour security, and amenities that made it feel more like a luxury hotel than a temporary residence. As I signed the lease agreement, I calculated the irony. The monthly rent was approximately half what Michael and Vanessa had planned to spend warehousing me at Lakeside Gardens. For substantially less than their care facility would have cost, I would have independence, dignity, and a concierge to assist with any needs that arose. The weekend brought the bittersweet task of deciding what to keep from a lifetime of accumulation. Margaret's jewelry and personal items were non-negotiable. The sapphire necklace I'd given her on our 25th anniversary, the pearl earrings she'd worn to every faculty formal event, the antique silver brush set that had been her grandmother's. Our wedding album and family photographs needed preservation, as did my academic awards and most treasured books. First editions of game theory classics, signed copies from colleagues who'd become intellectual giants in their fields, my own published works that still generated modest royalty checks each quarter. My chess set, of course, replacing the broken knight with one from the spare set Margaret had given me on my 60th birthday. "Because you always need to see multiple moves ahead," she'd said with that knowing smile that had first captivated me in graduate school. For furniture and larger items I couldn't bear to part with, I hired a storage company recommended by Eleanor. Professional movers would transfer everything from the brownstone to a climate-controlled facility outside the city. Sunday evening found me seated at my desk, drafting what might be the most important document of my academic career. Not a research paper or theoretical framework, but a letter to my son. I wanted it to be perfectly clear, unemotional, but devastating in its accuracy. After several attempts, I produced a single page that said everything necessary. Michael and Vanessa, if you're reading this, you've discovered your keys no longer work. The locks were changed yesterday by the new owners. I overheard your entire conversation after our call last week. Your plans for my cognitive assessment, selling my home, and using my assets to fund both my institutionalization and your Lake Superior vacation property were quite thorough. The brownstone has been sold for $115 million cash. My investment portfolio has been transferred to a new institution with security measures specifically designed to prevent access by individuals like yourselves. I've relocated to accommodations more suited to someone who values his independence. Your belongings have been placed in storage at Secure Storage Solutions on Western Avenue, Unit number 417. The first month is paid. After that, it's your responsibility. For 47 years, I taught students how to anticipate their opponent's strategies. It seems my final lesson will be for my own son. I won't be available at any of my previous contact numbers. My attorney, whose card is attached, will handle any necessary communication. Professor Howard Sullivan. I read it over one final time before sealing it in an envelope with Rebecca's business card. No emotional appeals, no expressions of hurt or betrayal, just the clinical application of consequence to action, the fundamental principle I'd taught for decades. Sunday night, I took a final walk through each room of the brownstone, the study where I'd written 3 textbooks and countless papers, the living room where Margaret and I had hosted department gatherings and student receptions, the kitchen where she'd perfected her bouillabaisse recipe during our sabbatical year after returning from France, Michael's old bedroom, long since converted to a guest room but still containing the built-in bookshelves I'd constructed when he developed his childhood dinosaur obsession. The window seat where Margaret had read him stories remained, though the dinosaur figurines had been replaced by visiting academic journals and conference proceedings. In our bedroom, my bedroom since her passing, I sat on the edge of the bed where Margaret had died. The hospice nurse had arranged for a hospital bed, but my stubborn wife had insisted on spending her final days in our own bed, in our own room, with the view of the maple tree she'd planted 30 years earlier. "Promise me you'll be careful after I'm gone," she'd said, her voice barely audible as the morphine dulled the worst of the pain. "Michael loves you, but he doesn't understand you. Never has." I dismissed her concern then, attributing it to medication and the heightened emotions of those final days. Now, 3 years later, her words echoed with prophetic clarity. "You were right, Maggie," I whispered to the empty room. As usual. Monday morning, I finalized arrangements with the movers. They would arrive Wednesday to transfer my selected belongings to the Gold Coast Grand apartment and the remainder to storage. The brownstone would be left largely furnished for the new owners, who planned to use it as a high-end rental for visiting professors and university affiliates. Monday afternoon, Rebecca called with an update. The title search is complete. No issues found. We're on track for closing tomorrow at 10 a.m. Excellent. And the funds transfer? Will happen immediately upon closing. The cashier's check will be deposited directly to your new account at Chicago Trust and Savings. Theodore is prepared to handle everything. Thank you, Rebecca. Your efficiency has been remarkable. I learned from the best, Professor, she replied, a smile evident in her voice. Strategic timing was always your specialty. Tuesday morning dawned clear and cold, one of those pristine Chicago winter days when the lakefront gleams like a freshly polished mirror. I dressed with particular care in a suit I'd purchased for a keynote address at Harvard 5 years earlier. The closing took place at the title company's downtown offices, a sterile room with uncomfortable chairs and fluorescent lighting that did no favors to anyone's complexion. I signed document after document, my signature growing slightly more unsteady with each page, not from hesitation, but from the sheer volume of paperwork required to legally transfer ownership of the home where I'd spent 35 years of my life. Congratulations, Professor Sullivan, said the representative from Lakefront Properties, sliding a cashier's check across the table. $115 million as agreed. I felt nothing as I accepted the check. No remorse, no nostalgia, only the cool satisfaction of a strategy successfully executed. The same feeling I'd experienced when demonstrating particularly elegant game theory solutions to my graduate seminars. I departed the closing with Rebecca, who insisted on escorting me directly to Chicago Trust and Savings. I don't want any mishaps with a check of this magnitude, she explained, as we navigated the sidewalks still treacherous with patches of ice. Theodore had prepared all the necessary documentation, and the deposit was processed with surprising efficiency. By noon, I was officially a millionaire with a new address and financial security beyond Michael's reach. The funds will be available immediately, Theodore assured me. I've set up the portfolio allocations as we discussed, conservative enough for stability but with growth potential to offset inflation, and as requested, any withdrawal over $10,000 will require in-person verification and 48-hour processing. Perfect, I nodded, signing the final authorization. What would trigger notification to my son? Nothing, Theodore replied firmly. You've explicitly declined to add any additional authorized persons to these accounts. Without legal intervention through a court-ordered guardianship, no one but you can access this information. By Tuesday afternoon, I was settled in my new apartment at the Gold Coast Grand. The space was modern and impersonal, nothing like the warm, book-lined rooms of the brownstone, but it offered spectacular views of Lake Michigan and a sense of security I hadn't realized I'd been missing. The concierge, a dignified man named Raymond with the discreet manner of a career hotelier, provided a comprehensive orientation to the building's services, housekeeping twice weekly, laundry service available daily, a car and driver with 24-hour notice, security protocols that included visitor registration and keycard access to residential floors. We have several residents in similar situations, Professor Sullivan, Raymond mentioned as he demonstrated the apartment's features. Downsizing after retirement or transitional housing during estate settlements. You'll find the community quite congenial. I arranged Margaret's photograph on the nightstand, the one taken on our 30th anniversary in Paris, her smile radiant against the backdrop of the Seine. Her jewelry box found a home on the sleek dresser that bore no resemblance to our antique bedroom set. My chessboard claimed the small table by the window overlooking the lake. My final task was the most important. I hired a locksmith, an older gentleman named Victor with arthritic hands that mirrored my own, to change the locks at the brownstone with the new owner's permission. Just want to make sure no unexpected visitors use old keys, I explained, a half-truth that Victor accepted with professional indifference. Then I taped my letter to the inside of the front door, positioned precisely at eye level, where Michael and Vanessa couldn't possibly miss it when they tried their keys on Friday. As a final touch, I purchased a small wireless camera disguised as a smoke detector, positioning it to capture their reaction when they discovered my countermove. Perhaps it was petty, but after a lifetime of analyzing human behavior, I couldn't resist the opportunity to observe this particular experiment. With everything in place, I settled into my new apartment on Wednesday evening, a glass of Margaret's favorite Cabernet in hand. The chessboard was set up by the window overlooking Lake Michigan, pieces arranged exactly as they had been in my study. I picked up the white queen, examining it in the fading light. Your move may have been strong, Michael, I murmured, but you failed to consider all the pieces on the board. I replaced the queen and moved my knight instead. Check. Thursday brought unexpected pleasures in my new environment. I discovered a cafe in the lobby that brewed proper espresso, a rarity in a country that generally preferred quantity over quality when it came to coffee. The barista, a young woman with multiple piercings and a comprehensive knowledge of single-origin beans, reminded me of my graduate assistant from 15 years earlier. Ethiopian yirgacheffe, she suggested, noting my hesitation before the extensive menu. Medium body, bright acidity, floral notes. Perfect, I nodded, impressed by her expertise. My late wife always preferred the complex profiles. Good taste, she smiled, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. I'm Zoe, by the way, here every morning from 6 to noon. Professor Sullivan, Howard. Professor of what? Game theory and strategic decision-making, retired now. She slid the espresso across the counter. Like in A Beautiful Mind? That Nash guy? I smiled. Similar field, though my work was less revolutionary and my life considerably less dramatic. Still cool. My brother's getting his MBA, says game theory is making a comeback with all the tech industry strategy stuff. The fundamental principles remain applicable across contexts, I agreed, savoring the perfectly pulled espresso. Human decision-making patterns are remarkably consistent, even as environments evolve. Zoe nodded thoughtfully. Same with coffee, actually. Trends come and go, but what makes a good cup hasn't changed in centuries. I found myself chuckling. A perceptive observation. See you tomorrow, Professor? I suspect you will. The brief interaction left me feeling more connected than I had in months. At the brownstone, surrounded by memories and Margaret's absence, I'd gradually reduced my social circle to occasional interactions with academic colleagues and perfunctory conversations with neighbors. Here, anonymity offered a strange freedom, the opportunity to be perceived without preconceptions or history. I spent the remainder of Thursday exploring my new neighborhood, familiarizing myself with the essential geography of my changed circumstances. The pharmacy 3 blocks east that could transfer my prescriptions, the small bookstore on the corner specializing in academic texts and foreign language publications, the park where retired men gathered for chess matches of varying quality. I observed them for nearly an hour, their openings predictable, middle games occasionally inspired, endgames frequently flawed. When one particularly aggressive player demolished his opponent with a classic queen sacrifice, I found myself nodding in appreciation. You play? The victor asked, noticing my attention. A lifetime ago, I replied. Join us tomorrow. We can always use fresh blood. These guys are too predictable. He gestured toward his defeated opponent with good-natured competitiveness. Perhaps I will. The invitation settled pleasantly as I walked back to the Gold Coast Grand. Connection without complication. Engagement without expectation. Perhaps this exile would offer unexpected compensations. Thursday evening, I checked the hidden camera feed on my tablet. The brownstone appeared undisturbed, my letter still taped to the inside of the front door. One more day, until Michael and Vanessa's return. I slept better than I had in months, untroubled by the creaks and settling noises of the old brownstone, free from the weight of impending betrayal. The modern mattress supported my arthritic joints more effectively than my familiar bed, and the sound-dampening windows muted the city's nocturnal symphony to a distant hum. Friday arrived with crystal clarity. I woke early, made coffee in the unfamiliar kitchen, and settled into the leather chair by the window with my tablet connected to the hidden camera feed. Michael and Vanessa's flight would land at O'Hare at 2:15 p.m. Allowing for baggage claim and the drive from the airport, they should arrive at the brownstone around 4 Lau. I spent the morning exploring my new neighborhood, stopping at the chess club I'd observed the previous day. The aggressive player from yesterday, who introduced himself as Morris, retired financial analyst, proved a worthy opponent, his style reminiscent of my more aggressive graduate students. Not bad for an academic, he conceded after I checkmated him in 27 moves. Most of you theory types can't translate to practical application. A common misconception, I replied, resetting the board. Theory, properly understood, is simply practice distilled to its essence. By 3:30, I was back in my apartment watching the empty entryway of my former home on the tablet screen. I poured a small measure of scotch. Margaret had never approved of daytime drinking, but I decided exceptional circumstances warranted exception to established rules. At 4:17, the camera detected motion. A silver Audi, Michael's car, pulled into the driveway. I watched as my son emerged, tanned from the Hawaiian sun, helping Vanessa collect their luggage from the trunk. They moved with the relaxed confidence of people returning to familiar territory, to a future they believed they controlled. Michael approached the front door first, suitcases in hand, fumbling for his keys. The key entered the lock but wouldn't turn. He frowned, trying again, jiggling the key with increasing frustration. "That's weird," I heard him say. "My key's not working." Vanessa stepped forward, setting down her designer carry-on. "Let me try mine." Her attempt was equally unsuccessful. She examined the lock more closely, her therapist's observational skills finally kicking in. "Michael, this is a new lock. Look at the finish. It's different from the original." My son's face transformed, confusion giving way to alarm. "What the hell? Dad?" He banged on the door, then peered through the side window. "Dad, are you in there?" "Try calling him," Vanessa suggested, already pulling out her phone. I watched her dial my disconnected landline, her frown deepening when the automated message played. "The number you have reached is no longer in service." "Something's wrong," Michael said, now genuinely concerned. Maybe he had a medical emergency, fell and couldn't reach the phone? "Check the back door," Vanessa suggested. "I'll try the neighbors." The camera lost sight of them temporarily. 5 minutes later, they returned to the front door, Michael's face now pale beneath his tan. "Mrs. Abernathy says she saw moving trucks yesterday, professional movers clearing out the house." His voice had lost its confidence. "She said Dad told her he was relocating." "That's impossible," Vanessa insisted. "He couldn't organize something like that on his own, not in his condition." The casual dismissal of my capabilities, the same capability they'd planned to legally challenge, sent a surge of vindication through me. Michael examined the lock again, then tried peering through the mail slot. "Wait, there's an envelope taped to the inside of the door. I can see it, but I can't reach it." "The basement window," Vanessa said suddenly. "The one in the laundry room. He never locks it properly." They disappeared again. 10 minutes later, the front door opened from within. Michael stood in the entryway, the white envelope in his trembling hands, his face ashen. "What is it?" Vanessa asked, stepping inside. Without speaking, Michael handed her the letter. I watched their expressions transform as they read my words: shock, disbelief, and finally, the dawning horror of comprehension. "He heard us," Vanessa whispered, "that night before we left. He sold the house," Michael's voice cracked. "He actually sold our family home." $15 million, Vanessa said, grasping at the number like a lifeline. "But where did he go? Where's all the furniture, the books, everything?" Michael was already pulling out his phone, scrolling frantically. "I'm checking our accounts. Maybe we can see where he transferred the money." I smiled as I imagined his next discovery: the closed accounts, the vanished portfolio, all traces of my financial presence erased from institutions where he had contacts. "Nothing," he confirmed moments later, his voice hollow. "It's all gone, moved somewhere." Vanessa sank down on the bare floor, the reality of their situation finally hitting her. "We're supposed to close on the Lake Superior property next month. The earnest money is non-refundable." "Forget the damn vacation home," Michael exploded, his composure finally cracking. "My father just outmaneuvered us like we were children. All our stuff is in storage, our access to his accounts is gone, and we have no idea where he is." "Call this attorney," Vanessa said, examining Rebecca's card. "Maybe we can challenge the sale somehow, prove he wasn't competent." Michael laughed bitterly. "The cognitive assessment we scheduled, the one we hadn't done yet, the one that was supposed to prove he couldn't manage his own affairs, he just executed a complex real estate transaction, financial transfer, and relocation plan in under a week. Good luck convincing a judge he's incompetent." They sat in stunned silence, surrounded by the empty walls of what had been my home for 35 years. No family photos, no bookshelves lined with academic texts, no chess set by the window, just bare floors and the echoing sound of consequences. "He was my father," Michael said finally, his voice small and broken. "And we were going to put him away. For his own good, we said, but we needed the money," Vanessa finished flatly. "For the lake house, for our future. We thought it would be easy." "He taught game theory for almost 50 years, Michael said, a hint of bitter pride breaking through his shock. "Strategic decision-making, anticipating your opponent's moves, and we never once considered he might be 10 steps ahead of us." I turned off the tablet, having seen enough. Walking to the window of my new apartment, I gazed out at Lake Michigan, its waters turned golden by the setting sun. Somewhere across the city, my son was learning the most expensive lesson of his life. I poured another glass of Cabernet and raised it toward Margaret's photograph. To consequences, my love. And to new beginnings. The days ahead would bring challenges, of course. Michael might attempt legal action, though Rebecca assured me his position was weak given the circumstances. My advancing age would eventually require accommodations beyond what my current independence allowed. The natural progression of life's endgame would continue unabated. But for now, I had reclaimed agency over my remaining years. The final chapter would be written on my terms, not dictated by those who saw me as a resource rather than a person. Tomorrow I would return to the chess club in the park, perhaps start work on that book I'd always meant to write. Not another academic text, but a memoir of a life spent studying strategic decisions, while sometimes failing to apply those principles to personal choices. Visit the Art Institute exhibitions Margaret and I had loved. I might even call Rebecca to discuss setting up a foundation, something to fund scholarships for game theory students interested in ethical applications of strategic thinking. A legacy beyond buildings and bank accounts. The future stretched before me. Uncertain perhaps, but undeniably mine to determine. No one's burden. No one's resource to exploit. Just an old professor with one final lesson to teach. Never underestimate your opponent, especially when he has nothing left to lose.